Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Art of Life podcast. So, today I have a really special guest with me. She is Tenya. She's an energy healer and a self care coach, and she is going to be shortly starting her quantum healing membership. So, there's so much that we've got to learn from her. So, welcome on board, Tenya.
Thank you so much.
So, before we dive into everything, just walk us through your journey. How did you get into all of this? Was this your plan all along? And what are you doing now?
Oh, was getting into energy healing my plan all along? No. Someone asked me on a podcast the other day, what did I want to do when I was little? And I wanted to be a photographer. And ironically, that is where I met my husband. We both worked for a photography studio. And so I think that the universe was kind of putting that kind of career in my pathway to meet him, because he was my escape from the what I didn't know at the time was the turmoil of my household. I grew up in a home with a mom who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when she was about 28 years old. And so I was about 7 or 8 years old when that diagnosis came in. So you can imagine that she was struggling for several years before that diagnosis. And so she took up a lot of the emotions in the house, not realizing that the four of us kids in the house were unable to have emotions because she was taking all of them. And it's not, and I'm not saying this in a like, oh, she took them away from us, like we weren't allowed to have them because she was selfish and she took them all. She was dealing with her own stuff, right? She had her own mental illness that she had to deal with. And then there was my dad, who was learning to deal with a spouse who was bipolar, and he was in the military. And so he had this perceived notion of how somebody was supposed to behave. And, that just kind of really threw a wrench into his perspective. And so he had to learn how to deal with that and help us four kids. Well, if you're a parent who doesn't know in the beginning how to deal with this stuff, how can you teach your kids how to deal with it? And so we learned early on to walk on eggshells, to keep our emotions to ourselves, to stay out of the house as much as possible, and being that Generation X, we're known as the feral generation. And it's just like we raised ourselves out in the wild. And there were a lot of times throughout my childhood where self-care came into my awareness, but I never really picked up on it. Like meditate. My mom used to teach meditation to the kids in the neighborhood. And so she was showing us how to do self-care, what self-care to do, but not really kind of saying, hey, come here and let me explain why you should be doing this, and why it's a good idea to get started in doing this. And then there are a few other things that happen along the way. But the pivotal point for me in my journey was in 2018, when life was just, it was such a banger year for our family. It was so amazing. Our twins were graduating high school. My husband and our oldest were graduating from college. We sold the home that we raised our children in for 16 years and moved to our forever home right on the Chesapeake Bay. So we're right on the water. It's an absolutely beautiful community. My husband's job was going great. My job was going great. Our marriage was going great. There were no issues except for what was going on inside of me. I mean, I was struggling. One, we moved in winter, and so you can't really go to the beach and enjoy the beach when it's cold out.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do that. And I moved into a community with my best friend, and I had this vision of what this was going to be like. To me, it was going to be like the Golden Girls. Like, we were going to be over at each other's houses all the time, just dropping in like, hey, I'm here, have a cup of coffee, whatever. But during the winter, there was none of that. It was still very isolating. Even though we were in this wonderful community, we could not enjoy it because it was so cold out. And so I started to just kind of push that stuff down because there was too much going on that was really good. By the end of 2019, I had pushed it down so much that I was bursting into tears every few days because it was just itching to come out. It was just like, look, you've been pushing us down for so many years. It is time for you to really pay attention to what's going on. And I was like, nope, nope. I pushed it down with alcohol. I started smoking again. I started, we would go out to bars all the time. And so I was not eating very healthy. I was not taking care of myself in an effort to not have to take care of myself, if that makes any sense. And so 2020, beginning of 2020, I was like, look, I had enough awareness of how I was feeling that I knew I needed some kind of help. And at that time, I only knew the traditional ways, medication and talk therapy, because that's what I grew up with. That is what is advertised. That is what your doctors tell you. Hey, if you're feeling this way, here's a bottle of pills. Make sure you call, find a therapist and talk to them. They'll be able to help you. And so I did that. Right at the height of COVID, I had to call through my insurance company to get a telehealth visit because my doctor at the time did not offer them. So I had an appointment with a doctor that I never met, didn't know, and I'm expected to be vulnerable and explain to this doctor that I've thought about running my vehicle into a telephone pole so I could get a few days off. I did not feel comfortable sharing that information because in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, I tell them that I'm thinking about doing that. Are they now going to call the local hospital and say, hey, we need you to go? And, it was all these visions of what happens in the movies when you're suicidal started to pop into my head. And I was just like, nope, I'm just going to tell them that I cry all the time. And I just don't want to feel that anymore. And so I did that, and he put me on a medication that I had been on before because it worked okay. I mean, it worked well enough to make me feel better, but I never stayed on anything because while it made me feel better in a sense that I wasn't crying all the time, I really wasn't happy on any of these happy pills that it never made me joyful. It never brought me excitement into my life. It never showed me what I really had to be grateful for.
It's a little bit like having a Panadol. Let's say your back's hurting and you have a Panadol, and yes, it'll ease the symptoms, so to speak. But if your back needs some sort of real care, there is a spinal injury there, you can dull it down all you wish with a Panadol. Yes, it'll help. But the ache's still there, the root cause is still there. So you've just dulled down the pain. So
Right.
yes, temporarily, yes, you're sort of not crying because the pill's helping you with that, but you still have the same icky stuff going inside you.
Exactly. And when I went to the talk therapist, and I always want to preface that she was absolutely doing her job. She knew what she was doing. However, I don't think she was the right therapist for me because for me, it felt like the same routine I had been through a few times before with other therapists, where you start to talk about your childhood, you talk about your family, and then it gets to the point where you think that, oh my gosh, it's all my mom's fault, right? It's always it's always one of the parents' faults that you're feeling this way. And granted, my childhood was not as loving and comforting as I once believed it to be, but I know now that my parents did the best job that they could with the knowledge that they had at the time. And I can't fault them for that. But it did take a lot of years for me to get to that point and to understand that. But I wasn't getting anywhere with talk therapy.
But
She
it's
had
also, maybe I'll just stop you there. We'll continue
Yeah.
with the story because it's very interesting. But you bring out a really, really important point that, when we start looking inwards, the first thing we see is all the pain that's caused to us. And usually it goes to our parents or somebody who's very, very close to us. It does not mean that they did their worst. They were trying the best that they were able to, the best people that they could be. And it's also that we are attracting those people, like that pain still inside us. Yes, we chose them as well. So they're also bringing out all of the challenges that we needed to have anyway. In the beginning, when we start looking in, we really, because that's a coping mechanism. So if you're going up from the emotional chart, you're going up from depression or suicidal thoughts, you're climbing up. The first way up is to actually start blaming others, because that's how you are at least having some hope. So you are actually progressing on the emotional scale a little bit when you're starting to blame others.
Yep.
And then there's a higher road above where you start realizing, okay, it's not with them.
Right.
So it's a very natural thing that we'll come out and we'll just blame the rest of the world.
Yeah, it is. It's very natural. But it also does take more, you can't just stop there, right? You can't just stop at that blame and be like, oh, it's everybody else's fault. You have to take responsibility for your own healing. You know, what you went through is not your fault, right? You didn't say, okay, I want you to treat me this way. I want you to treat me this way. Yes, we did attract it and we did sign up for these lessons, but on the human side, it's not our fault, right? But we do have to take responsibility for how we heal from it. And you can still have, barring any abuse that is really, there is abuse out there that is really unforgivable, right? But barring any of that, you can still learn to have a relationship with your parents, even though they may not have been the best parents in the world. And a relationship can look so different. My relationship with my parents now is a few phone calls a year. It's a couple visits a year, because that is where the healing that I've done has brought us. It used to be, it was many phone calls and many visits throughout the year, but most of those phone calls and visits were fueled with anger, frustration, sadness, guilt. There is no more of that. There are fewer phone calls, fewer visits, but they're filled with nice conversation. They're filled with joy and laughter.
You're building boundaries. You're
Yeah.
building healthy boundaries. You're giving them the space that they need, so you are prepared for it. There's a balance in your interactions. And then there's only so much of, sometimes, let's say, the lower vibration energy that you can take. And then you need to go back and you need to fill your own cup as well. Bring yourself up as well.
Yep. And that's one of the things I learned when I decided to stop the medication, stop talk therapy. At my desk, I was crying and I was like, I need something that is going to get rid of this. I want something that's going to get rid of this feeling. I was so angry with all the people who said, you have to learn to manage your depression. You have to learn to manage your anxiety. You have to learn how to survive with it. You can't get rid of it. You can't cure it.
That's exactly how a lot of listeners would be feeling as well. If you knew how to do it, you would do it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
anyone understands, like, especially if there's someone who's just crying every day. You of all the people really want to change your things. You don't need to hear once
Right.
more, hey, you need to change, you need to get over it. Like,
Right.
how? Tell me and I'll do it.
Right, exactly. And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for somebody to kind of hold my hand and guide me through how I was going to do this. So I did a Google search for holistic emotional healing because I didn't want to take any medications. I didn't want to take supplements. I didn't want to change my eating habits at the time. And I just wanted something that was going to get rid of it. And this modality called the emotion code came up on my Google search. And I was like, oh, okay, emotions. Okay, I started researching it. And I was a little skeptical at first because, again, my only introduction to energy work before this was acupuncture and the law of attraction. That was pretty much my only introduction by this point. This was early 2020. And this was at the height of COVID. And so there was a lot of, you talk about being isolated, and there's a lot of online work, that kind of stuff. And this modality could be done through Zoom or through email. Like, you didn't even have to be in the same room with the person. And so this was like this was something that I was very, very interested in, especially since I didn't have to wait around for things to open back up. And so I started looking into it, and it was this modality of using muscle testing or kinesiology to find trapped emotions in your body. And then you use a refrigerator magnet over your governing meridian 3 times, 10 times, however many times you need to do it to release these trapped emotions. At first, I was like, okay, so I just go get a magnet off my refrigerator and rub it over the top of my head. Okay, okay. It took me a couple days to be like, I think I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this and see how it works, because what do I have to lose but a couple $100 to see how well this works? And so I found a practitioner through YouTube. I made an appointment, and it actually ended up being with his wife, who was getting her certification in the emotion code and body code. I went through the session, and the session was, I think, about 20 minutes long. It was an introductory session. I think I paid $40 for the first one. It was, and every one after that was like $150. So I tried out this first one. It's about 20 minutes long. And after I got off the phone, I was like, I feel quite lighter. I felt better. And I was like, maybe there is something to this. And so I gave it some time. And after probably about a day and a half, I started to feel the anxiety, depression kind of creep back up. I was like, maybe this doesn't work. Maybe this isn't going to work. And so I kept hearing the nudge, try again, try again. And so I did. I signed up for another session, and this session again, it was a second session, so it was a little bit more, but it was still only about 20 or 30 minutes long. Got off the phone, and I felt better again. I was like, okay, maybe this does work. And about 3 days after, so it lasted a little bit longer, I started to feel it kind of creep in again. I was like, what is this? Like, why isn't this gone? Like, I'm being told that energy healing can work fast, and it's easy, and it's instantaneous, and why does this keep coming back? And so I went to Facebook groups and started doing some research and asking questions. And what I found out was that, yes, and a lot of times energy healing work can work very quickly. But when you have something that had such a tight hold on you for so long, there can be so many different layers. And I was like, oh gosh, this is gonna cost me. It's not covered by insurance. It's not something that insurance companies believe in. And so I really had to kind of dig deep into my money beliefs at that point and be like, is this something that I want to invest in myself? And just as I was going through all of that kind of contemplation, like, do I want to move forward with this? Am I willing to go into debt to feel better? Was the question that I kept asking myself. Discover Healing offered a webinar for $97. And you sign up for this webinar and you learn all about it. You learn like where it started, how it works, all this stuff. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to, before I go any further, I'm going to check this out. And so I signed up for the webinar, and by the end of the webinar, I was like, I'm getting my certification. I don't care where the money's coming from. I'm going to figure it out. And I signed up to get my certification wholly just to work on myself, just to learn everything I could about it, to work on myself. But through that, I also signed up for their second one, the body code. So within a month, I completed the emotion code, and then I signed up for the body code. And then this modality called easy entity release came into my awareness. This challenged my beliefs a little bit, because I believe that we have ghosts around us. I believe that we have spirits around us. But to think that they're like impacting us negatively, like that was like refrigerator magnet helping me to heal was already woo-woo enough. Now we're going to bring these invisible beings that have been around for who knows how long, that are basically coming around me and just like poking at me and just like, hey. That's how I picture them now. They're just annoying energies that are just poking at you.
A lot of our listeners are going to be very curious about that. What are these entities? And it's not very often that we actually talk about it. You know, when you're reading blogs and so on, we all talk about this stuff. I believe that's more digestible for the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff that is woo-woo, but at least it's a little bit more mainstream woo-woo. Now, what is this new stuff that you're talking about? What are entities? What is all this negative energy?
Oh, these entities, they're so fun. When entities first started coming into my awareness, because the body code does go into entities, but it doesn't really go into what kind of entities or what they can do, that kind of stuff. And so this modality, the easy entity release, it's now all in an app called Healing Remembered. Wonderful, beautiful app. But there are these entities that have been here since the beginning of time. And you think the beginning of time is like Adam and Eve. No, this goes so much further back than Adam and Eve. They are, alien attachments. They're beings that come from different universes, galaxies. Just, people think that everything is just so logically explained. You cannot logically explain energy, entities, alien attachments. You just can't. You either believe it or you don't.
Well, yeah. How I explain it is that as we see this physical world or as we see the life on earth, that's like a tip of the iceberg. And that's just
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of what we see. We think we are in control of our lives. We're really not. We try and control them every day, but literally, I could just pass out right now on this podcast.
Yep.
There's no control. And like you say, there's so many intergalactic beings, just like they're light beings, just like there's guidance that we tune into.
Mm-hmm.
There's the other negative, there's the other dark side as well. I think we're both energy coaches, so there's a lot more that goes on energetically
Yeah.
than we are just aware of. Started cleaning off these woo-woo entities and aliens and these mystic dark beings. What
Yeah.
change started happening? And what did
Oh
you
my
learn
gosh.
about yourself?
When I started to learn about my light score, and my light scoring being the light energy versus dark energy, and I was taught, you always want your light score to be at 100%, because that means that you don't have as much darkness attached to you. And this score can absolutely fluctuate depending on how you're feeling. If you're sitting more in gratitude more often, that light score is going to be higher most of the time. When you start getting into those vibrations of lack and depression and anxiety, it starts to come down, and those nefarious things can come back in and be like, oh yay, we get to feed off of her again. When I started to really pay attention to these entities that were attached, that were feeding off of my low vibration energy, it taught me to shift my energy. I was able to release them back to wherever they came from. I send them back with love and elevated consciousness, because the entities that I seem to attract, they are ready to let go of that negative world. They are ready to move on into a more positive role in their lifetime, right? They have their lifetime, we have ours. There's no difference in that. And they're ready to shift their energy just like we want to shift our energy. With my clients, bringing these entities up into our awareness when we work with them, they are ready to let go of help, the help that these entities and beings were giving them at the time. Because we do allow them to attach to us, because they do make us feel better. But in order for us to feel better, we still have to be in those low vibrations so that the entities keep feeding us what it is that we're looking for.
So, for example, maybe there's a time when you just learn to drive, and it's the first time behind the wheels and you're scared. And because you're scared, you're just wanting that help.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a being that comes in, kind of like just takes your body for a ride. Yes, you're in the car, and this being takes over. And so physically, you're the one who's driving the car, but it's the being that's helping you, telling you when to brake and so on. So you have needed this being at some point in time. Problem is, it's not a conscious agreement. You're not aware of it. And if they come in, they might not actually leave because they came in on something you were afraid of. And so sometimes when they are actually down with their energy because they need to feed off your fear, they'll actually wire it back and bring more of the fear back.
Yep. So they can help you. Yep.
So that's where the repeating thoughts, the repeating patterns come in. And you think, well, I am trying to have this positive mindset. I'm trying to not think about my toxic ex, but it just keeps coming back because you have a being in there, you have a circuitry there that's literally rewiring and bringing back the whole thing again.
Yep. That is an amazing way to explain it. That is, yeah, I love that explanation. When we're able to release these things, it gives our energy and our bodies the ability to heal the way that it's meant to. And so with the help of those three modalities, within 4 months of starting my certification or starting with this modality of the emotion code, I was about 80% healed within 4 months.
Wow.
And I had dealt with anxiety and depression I had 40 years of anxiety and depression that I had been carrying around. And it wasn't all mine. And that was the other thing I realized, was that I was carrying around my mom's energy, my dad's energy. I was carrying around my grandparents' energy. I was carrying around energy going back up to 30 generations that was feeding this anxiety and depression. So after that 4 months, I started to kind of hit a wall with the energy work. I had joined a coaching program, and I was told that I had to start meditating and journaling and working out and eating better, doing all this stuff that I had tried before, but it never really stuck. I tried meditation, but I couldn't sit for very long. And so I wasn't doing it right, and all this stuff. When I started doing it, then it was like, oh my gosh, I could sit for like 5 to 10 minutes without really, like, I still had monkey mind coming through, but I was able to not control the thoughts that were coming in, but not allow them to control me. I was able to push them aside and really allow my body to be in the moment of where I was. Journaling was a little bit harder to get into because my privacy around writing down my thoughts had been interfered with when I was a teenager. My mom had read a letter I wrote to my sister.
Yeah, but even before that, because you had a bipolar mom, and then she was doing a lot of the emotions in the house, she was taking that space. Even as a child, you never got to really fully express it. So now suddenly you're supposed to do something that you've almost never done.
And the fact that my mom had read my private letter to my sister and made it such a big deal. She called me home from school because of what was in this letter. And granted, I look back now, and she absolutely should have. However, she should not have opened the letter in the first place, right? And so that really deterred me from writing things down. And so I actually had to do an energy session around being able to journal my thoughts, because before that, if I wrote something down, I was so afraid that my husband or kids would read it. I know I can trust them, right? I mean, logically, I know I can trust them, but my body and my heart did not believe that I could trust anybody with me writing down my thoughts. And so after about 2 months of meditation, getting back into journaling, really digging into like how to reparent myself. How do I teach myself to have my emotions and be okay with having the bad emotions, right? Because we seem to be okay with having the good emotions, but we're really deterred from having the bad emotions because they really don't make us feel good. But once I learned how to have them, I realized, you know what, when I'm mad, when I'm angry, it might last about 30 to 120 seconds, right? Maybe a minute or two. If I let myself be mad, it does not have to last a whole day. It doesn't have to last a whole month. I don't have to hold a grudge.
Because you've given the energy that space to come out. It actually is a lot, I guess, darker. It just takes more space, because if you try and contain it inside, then it has nowhere to go. So it just stays in the body longer. You keep feeling it, like little amount of it, because it's not gone. When you let it flow, it's okay. It just comes out.
It does. And it doesn't last very long. Within 6 months of finding this modality of the emotion code, my anxiety and depression was 100% gone. I still have moments of worry. I still have moments of sadness. I'll even like this past weekend, my whole Friday or Saturday, I was sad. I was depressed. I was like, I wanted to feel happy. But what I realized was my daughter's baby shower was the next day. And my body was grieving the fact that my child was going to become a mom. And where did that leave me as a mom? Even though logically I know that I'm still her mom, she's still going to need me, but it was just like there was some grief coming up about that. And that I did have to work through. I did energy work on it and it didn't lift because I had to actually allow myself to feel it. And because I was so busy trying to get stuff ready for the baby shower, I didn't allow myself to feel it. So I still get stuck in those moments sometimes.
But you're talking about a very important point that yes, there's energy work that you do at a spiritual level or energetic level. There's also a body level of emotions, and they just need to be given time. It still needs to be worked through. You can't rush through the process. And yes, your body might take a lot lesser time when you're doing something like this, but it still needs to feel the emotions. So when you're actually letting your emotions out, whether that was anger, whether that was guilt or shame, when you can let that out in real time, whether you're journaling, however your safe way is, then you've given them a place to go. It's good to let it go, but great that you could work through it. And great point that we need to work with our bodies and emotions as well.
Yeah, we are here to have a human experience, and sometimes we have to really just be human. But this energy work, it saved my life. It really did. And I don't take that lightly. I'm incredibly grateful for this modality coming into my awareness and being able to make it my own. When people say, what is it that you do? I always say, well, my practice is rooted in the emotion code. It's rooted in muscle testing, but I work from an app that has over 1,000 different energetic things in it to address, and I have over 100 different charts that I work from that goes from toxins to beliefs to emotions to entities to offensive energies. Energy work can work for everything. It really can. It can work for relationships. You can do energy work between two people to clear the energy between two people. You can do energy work around your mental health. You can do it around your fitness goals. You can do it around your money blocks. It is so expansive on what it can be used for.
So, what is a typical journey like for your clients? Like what happens when they start, and then how long do they have to go to those sessions?
Mm-hmm.
Journey.
So my typical clients usually do 6 to 12 sessions to start with. And they usually do the 6 because, and this is one session a week over 6 weeks. And within 6 weeks, you are going to now have at least a 50% reduction in your symptoms, at least a 50% reduction. And I think what helps my clients get there so quickly is that I'm constantly telling them that they have to do the conscious work as well. You can't just do the energetic work. You can't just sit there and have me do the energy clearing. We clear all this energy, and then you turn around and go back to continuing to do the same patterns that you've been doing. If we're working on, let's say we're working on anxiety, and we clear this anxiety in the first session, and we clear these entities, but you get off the phone and the first thing you do is go to a friend and start complaining about what your day was like, and you start complaining about what you're lacking. All you're going to do is put more back into that space that we just cleared all that energy from. And so I encourage them to do the mindset work as well. You have to shift your mindset in order to keep the energy work working, because you can't just do both. We can clear all the energy in the world, and after each session you feel better, you feel calmer, you're relaxed, you're ready for a nap. You take that nap, but you go right back into doing what you were doing. You're just gonna put stuff back.
So, our listeners right now, they're wondering how they can reach out to you. And if there's something that you can probably give to them right now, so that that can be their takeaway, just to have a feel of what energy work is like.
Yeah, so you can find me all over at Design Your Existence, designyourexistence.com, Instagram, Facebook. The takeaway that I want you to take with you is that you're worth spending your time on. Learn to sit in meditation, in some kind of meditation, even if it's just for a minute a day to start, whether it's guided or in silence. And I always recommend working towards sitting in silence, sitting with yourself, but start somewhere. Don't just say, oh, I've tried this for 3 days and it's not working. It takes a lot longer than 3 days for something to shift. Stick with it, make it a routine. Don't discount how powerful you are. Don't just keep giving your power away because you can't do something.
That's so well said. Amazing. Thanks a lot, Tenya. This was such an amazing episode. Thanks for sharing your time with us. And listeners, please reach out to Tenya. She's an amazing energy coach, and she does wonderful one-on-one sessions to help you with your growth journey and whatever it is that you are seeking in your life. So here's to a very good life to all of us. And thanks, Tenya. We will see you again with another episode of the Art of Life podcast. Here's to transformation, and here's to a better life.